everyone, and welcome to the Learning in Design Mastermind podcast that bridges the world of instructional design and all the wonderful topics that we're going to be talking about today regarding still multimedia design and production. I am Daisy Barreto, your host, and with me in some place here is Dr. Conklin, our co-host for this podcast. I am thrilled to be your guide as we explore the exciting intersection of these fields and then dynamic intersections with the content. And in each episode, we will explore the latest trends, case studies, and practical tips from professionals in the field that can help you deliver exceptional learning experiences. So here with us today is Amber Collum, and she is a MIT alumnus. And Amber, could you please tell us more about your position, where you're currently working, and what you do?
My name is Amber Sloan. I am Watson's Educational Technology Specialist. I am working in person at Watson College of Education, and there's a lot underneath my umbrella, but a good majority of what I do is I work with interns going out into the school system with EdTPA, but I also bridge the gap with ed tech with technology for faculty, and I go into classes and I talk about ed tech tools, and I get the privilege to present on some of these tools. So a little bit about what I do over here.
All right, since you're talking so much about ed tech tools, maybe you can start sharing a little bit of what are some of your favorite tools, what you do with them, how are maybe teachers or faculty integrating them in their classes?
So a lot of the ed tech tools that I primarily use on pretty much a daily basis have been for the last, I would say, 6 months. I've been using Canva a lot with creating presentations for faculty, for students, for whatever I'm working on. That's my go-to site to do any multimedia presentation. I've recently dived into AI for the last about year. In this position, I've dived really headfirst into the whole AI world, and I'm just trying to keep up with the trends that are going on in education, primarily K-5, because that's where my subject was. So I lend my expertise to the K-5, the elementary, but I am broadening my horizons, and I've been working with high schoolers, high school teachers as well, trying to bridge that gap and have them more excited about using technology in their classrooms as well. I have had the opportunity to go into classrooms and teach about technology tools such as coding tools. I was recently over at elementary school using Probots. I've gotten to go to NC Ties and teach about coding with code.org. Dr. Barreto helped me out with that at NC Ties. I worked with Spheros, all over the range of ed tech, but my primary focus is I like to make learning fun, and I find different platforms to use that all the time. So there's a lot that I can talk about, but those are some of the ones that I primarily use.
That's wonderful, Amber. And I am gonna hold on for you to share a little bit more about AI because I think that's the topic that everybody wants to talk about. But especially because you talk about images, and that design. I think one of the things for multimedia design and production that a lot of students may want to know is how to do that. And so can you explain your process for designing visually appealing images for a multimedia project? And I know that you've touched a little bit on this, like, what kind of resources do you often use, or maybe in addition to some of the things that you've already shared?
Yeah, like I said, I primarily use Canva for a lot of my multimedia presentations, but I go back to your class because I had you for the multimedia class. So I go back to your class often because I don't want to overwhelm or overstimulate the person that I'm teaching to. So I keep that into consideration when I'm going into Canva, and I try to make my designs based off of the audience that I'm teaching. So if I'm teaching something that has to do with K-5 education, I will make it a little more K-5 friendly. I'll add a little bit more, maybe some animation. Sometimes I'll add some pictures that correlate with the content that I'm talking about. But really, I go into my process of designing something is who am I trying to reach, who is my audience, and how am I going to capture them with what's on my screen. And I go back to the multimedia principles that I learned from you, and I basically take that and I'm like, okay, what are the important things that I have to focus on this slide? Can I make it so I'm not putting so much text that is going to overwhelm them? I want to make sure that they are gaining something from this. So I will go in there and I'll tweak what I need to do to make it not overwhelming. I do the same thing when I'm talking, like when I work with TPA interns. I've recently redesigned the entire Canvas shell that the interns use, and I created a supplemental. Um, I like to call it as a search engine because Canvas does not have a search feature. So I created a Google Sheet where topics are laid out and they can hit Control F to find what they need to find. And I try to make it so everything's underwhelming and not overwhelming. I don't use a lot of I want to make sure the contrast is good. I want to make sure the accessibility passes. And I use a lot of those in pretty much all of my presentations, whether or not it's for interns or if it's something for the college. I want to make sure it's readable and legible and everything is based off of the audience that I'm presenting to.
Thank you, Amber. And for those of you that are listening to the podcast and may not know what these multimedia principles are, those are 12 principles that Richard Mayer from Evidence-Based Research has created to guide the design of multimedia production and especially if with the content of like to facilitate learning. And I think like that's what you really touching base on how you're designing that. And the key thing here that I'm hearing from you saying, which I think is perfect, is that he has shared some principles of like, how you can segment the content, how you can ensure that you're adding, images that are correlating with the topic that you're presenting. But in addition to that, you're also doing some of the principles of design and more of the design of like color theory, that color scheme, the contrast, using making sure that your font is not clashing with the background, because all of us have been in that space where the background is too busy and the fonts are horrible for us to just see. And I don't know if you've experienced that with like maybe the teachers or, the people that you're working, and how do you help them, to shift, to make sure like, hey, this slide right here is so heavy, like there's so much text, I cannot even focus. How do you help them understand that?
I and everything that I do with my job, I think of it in terms of a K-5 teacher. So a lot of times when I am trying to, um, if I'm talking to somebody who has like a very busy background or whatever, I will like think of it in terms of a student and I will kind of like bring them to my perception of it. But really, when I was generating content for my fifth graders or my third graders, I wanted my whatever content I was teaching on the screen to be that focal point, and everything that I was saying matched what was on the screen. So it was a supplement to the screen. It wasn't like I wanted to make sure that my content was there on the screen, but really what was more important with what I was speaking. So when I'm talking to faculty or students or even teaching about instructional technology tools, whatever is on my screen is just like that learning aid to whatever I'm talking about. So when I have had present PD as a teacher, I would notice that a lot of these presentations would be very text heavy and very like the color contrast was not the best. So if I and when I got the opportunity to create my own presentations, I wanted to make it very light to read a lot of times. If I do a background, I'll supplement it with a color that will mute it down and just making sure, again, not overwhelming or overstimulating the person I'm trying to teach to. So I think of this as like a student who gets easily distracted by lots of things. And I think the more things that you have on your screen, the more distracted your audience is going to be. So that's how I think about it if I'm going in terms of talking to like a student or faculty members. I'm like, what is the most important thing you want to keep on this page? And that's what we're going to focus on.
That's wonderful, Amber. And I think like the way that you're approaching, especially like having them to understand, like put yourself in the shoes of a student, like, they're just gonna go through this presentation and then guiding them in this process is a good way to get them to think about, oh, I do need to redesign what I created to address the needs of my learner. And one of the things that I can even sense, and then you can talk more about this, you are in a space like in a unit where you have to collaborate with people, and there's a lot of teamwork involved. Can you talk about what is the importance of that in your projects, and maybe share with us a current project that you're working with where collaboration was key, and how you cultivated that collaboration?
So I'm very fortunate to be part of the EdTech unit here at Watson, where we have so many different, we have about 5 to 7 people who work with us. And I basically like we all bring something different to the table. And currently, Dr. Ertzberger and Tracy Pena are working on preparing for the EdTech mini conference. And we have like touch base meetings, and I feel like communication and collaboration is key for any project in which you're working at. And I learned that specifically from Dr. Conklin, because in my courses with her, a lot of our projects were group based. So I brought that into when I was teaching, because as a student, I did not like group projects as a student, but I have since then found a love for them, because really the product that you're doing together is going to be the product that you're bringing to different people, and talking about like what is our end result, and having those meetings like weekly or bi-weekly is really going to prepare us for a good finished product. And like with the EdTech mini conference, we are doing something new this year where we're having panels, and we're talking about like different panels. We have an AI panel, which you two are a part of, but we also will have like an emerging technology panel about things that are happening at Watson that we may not know about. So having those conversations with the faculty and the people that are interacting with it beforehand is really giving them a sense of, okay, this is what's going on. And we give them questions that they have to know beforehand. These are what you should be talking about, and kind of talking about their area of expertise. And again, just communication and collaboration are very important. And working with the EdTech team has really shown me that, because I was like, as a teacher, I worked with a team of teachers where our end result was to better the students. Well, now I have an entire college that I get to work with, but working with specifically this team, we're part of all the technology that goes on at the college. So if somebody needs help with a computer issue, Brian is our go-to. But if Brian's not here, I like sometimes step into that one. Again, just being there for each other. And like if I am going into a class talking about EdTech tools, I usually go and ask the professor beforehand. I'm like, what specifically do you want me to cover? And again, communication is something that I have grown into since being in more in this role, but really all the way since I was a school student, I had to communicate with groups, and I brought that into my professional life as well.
Amber, that's so great to hear that from you. And I think, like, you have many ways that you're talking about touch base and communication, which I think it could be very beneficial for those that are listening to, which is like not only communication within your team, the team that you work, which is like, the tech unit, but also even communication with the clients that you were working with, that is like, the faculty, like, how they're integrating this. So I think it's great that you're sharing that. One of the things that you mentioned, and I think it is a great follow-up for my next question to you, is this emerging technologies. And I think like we hear this a lot in our field, like what are the emerging technologies out there? Are there any emerging technologies that you see, and I think you touched base on this, but I'm just going to let you explore a little bit more on this, having a significant impact in the future, and how should we prepare for them?
So there, like recently, I was asked by my mother of all people, and she asked me, she was like, "Can you explain to me what is going on with AI in education?" And I sat up straight and I said, "Well, let's have a discussion." Um, I think one of the biggest emerging technologies out there right now for education, and that really has reshaped what education is AI. But in if we're not talking about AI, I feel like a lot of the emerging technologies out there are supplements to teach. So whether or not you're doing a going back to some of my tried and trues, which is like Kahoots and Quizlets and stuff like that, those are good assessment ones, but trying to revitalize and go forward into education is really bridging the gap between what's happening in education plus AI. So I feel like a lot of the tools that are geared towards teachers right now are AI based or have an AI component to them. My favorite one currently is Magic School. It is a platform for teachers, made by teachers for teachers, but it's an AI platform where you can generate literally probably 100 plus things that on there. You can generate lesson plans, you can generate rubrics, you can generate feedback, you can generate like songs for content, anything that you can think of in terms to make a teacher's life a little bit easier is going to be key and beneficial for today's teacher, because teachers' times are very, like any educator's time is very, very valuable. And I think using AI to help your productivity and help you better give instruction to your students is going to be a game changer for anybody. And I think AI really does that. And my whole goal this past year is to really bring AI awareness to those K-5, K-12 teachers who are kind of afraid or don't know what they're doing with AI, and trying to open their eyes to what AI can do and make it approachable, but also make it ethical for them to teach their students, as well as teaching themselves how to use it in an ethical way, but really can bring their students to the next level. For example, I was having a conversation with Dr. Hargrove, who teaches math methods here, and she was like, "How can I help AI, or how can I use AI with math?" And I was a math teacher for 7 of my 10 years of teaching. So this is something that I always play with. And when ChatGPT first came out in November 2022, I basically took problems that I did for my fifth grade students and I plugged them into ChatGPT. And I realized that ChatGPT couldn't do fifth grade content. And they're like, "But how is that possible?" And if you're giving an example with a multi-step word problem, ChatGPT or any AI platform. This could be Claude, this could be Copilot, this could be Gemini. Any AI platform is not going to be able to differentiate what's going to come first in the word problem. And specifically fractions, which is a huge part of fifth grade all the way through high school curriculum. And so basically, Dr. Hargrove and I sat down and said, okay, how can we use this to our benefit? So I showed her, I was like, okay, give me an example of something you teach. And she said, standard algorithm for adding 3-digit numbers. And I'm like, okay. So I plugged a prompt into one of the platforms. And personally, I like to use Gemini and Claude and then back it up with ChatGPT. Like I use 3 of them as my one. So I like will compare and contrast. But what I do is I take the answers and I really look at them and I say, okay, which one is really understanding what I'm trying to say? And from there, we took it a step further and we're like, it's not understanding how to compute or the 3-digit using the standard algorithm because it picks up with so many different little things on the internet that it gets confused. So I was like, now you can teach your students to analyze this and find out what happened, what went wrong. So now she's asking her students to be the teacher to figure out what the AI couldn't do. So that is stuff that I geek out on and I am excited to see because it's really teaching your students now to be problem solvers. And we have always tried to teach critical thinking as educators, but now you're taking critical thinking and problem solving to the next level because now you're competing with artificial intelligence. And now you have to realize, oh, the artificial intelligence is incorrect. But now you can really teach your students how to find those errors and how to solve them the right way.
It's so, I mean, it's so great to hear you saying this, especially because like I was in a conference and this is exactly what a lot of the people were talking about, especially it was a math engineer instructor, and then he was saying that he was doing the same problems with the students and that the math was wrong with some of these tools. And it is that process of problem solving, even though a lot of people are trying to say like, oh, it's gonna solve everything. But when you have an AI that it might not be as intelligent as you want, then you can use to your advantage, as you said, to then have these conversation about like the problem solving or to unpack or to use it ethically. So I appreciate you sharing that, and then how people out there can start thinking about how can they use that. Um, I think like, the last thing that we have here, like we're about to our last question for you, and maybe I am going to ask you a question for related to creativity, and then you can share that a little bit more. Um, how do you strike that balance between creativity and functionality in your design? Because a lot of people it's like, ooh, I want to be very creative, but then you still need to have design that is functional for your learners. Can you share how you do that? And maybe, any words of wisdoms or insight for people out there that wanted to be doing that on their own design?
So I can answer this. I see this in 2 different ways. I see this as an instructor and educator, but I also see this as a personal thing because graphic design is something that I have enjoyed pretty much since I was like 16 years old. My father kind of like opened this world of graphic design to me, and I kind of like have like immersed myself into it. So for me as a teacher, even to this day, and both of you know this, I like for things to look nice. I like things to look aesthetically pleasing, but I also want it to be functional. So for examples, if I am creating something for the TPA team or something for an instructor, I want it to have function where it could be accessed in a way that's going to benefit them. So even though I like a color scheme that may be brand colors, or if it is something that I'm creating that has hyperlinks, I want it to be functional for them, but I want it to look nice. So when I'm kind of coming up with ideas, I'm like, in my process, a lot of the times I have to get in there and I have to make mistakes in order to figure out what's going to be most functional. for what my client is wanting. So, like for example, I was presenting at NC Ties and I did a presentation on ABCs of AI and K-5 education. And I wanted them to see the prompts that I used for several of the different platforms. So what I did was, because ChatGPT is the only platform where you can copy and paste links, I created a document that had my prompts listed, but I also created an outline within that document so they can see the responses, and it gave them the responses so they can easily track it. And I wanted to embed that into the screen, into the slideshow. So I made sure that they had little headings of prompt 1, prompt 2, prompt 3. I also am a spreadsheet person who likes to keep track of data, but also likes to organize things in terms of spreadsheets. So a lot of my design aspects come from like a Google Sheet or Microsoft Excel, where I can organize things in a very clear and concise manner and not overwhelm them. So I think that's my big thing, is I don't want to overwhelm anybody who's ever looking at something that I create. I have, like, for a hobby, I like to draw on my iPad. So a lot of times I am making something, and again, I don't want to make the background too busy. I want to make sure that everything is very clear and people are able to read what I'm writing, etc., especially because it's my handwriting. So like if I'm writing on my iPad, I want, if I'm taking notes on my iPad, a lot of the times I want to make sure that my handwriting is clear enough so I can go back and read those notes. So it's kind of like my process is I go in there and I have a plan, and sometimes it works, and then sometimes it doesn't, and I have to revise it. So each each project is different, but I want to, it's kind of like that revision process that we always all have to do, and it's part of every instructional design process out there, is to revise. So if you don't succeed the first time, you're probably not going to succeed the first time. Try it again and figure out what's going to work for you.
Thank you, Amber. I think like, that what you said, and I'm just like recapping here, it's like a word of wisdom in terms of like a lot of people think that creativity is just like, it just like comes, and
Yeah.
then that's it. It's a process. And I think a lot of people forget about that. And one of the things that you said that I hope people are hearing and listen to this is that don't be afraid of trying and make mistakes and redo it again. Because I think this is the beauty. And then this is why a lot of kids are very creative and they do things because they're not afraid of trying and make an error. And in our field, because when we get to this becomes adult, we are afraid of make mistakes and try and make an error, so I think this is a great word of wisdom out there for people to, they don't need to be perfect or get it perfect at the first time. It is okay to just like, make it messy, try it out, and then exactly what you said, the process of the functionality, which is the evaluation of the creativity, then you can tone down, you can start doing the evaluation. So I appreciate you sharing all that. And with that, we are ending this session of our podcast here, the vodcast. I wanted just to thank you, Amber, for taking the time to share some wisdom with us and our listeners out there. And hopefully we can get you back for more of the great things that you're doing, especially with AI.
Thank you so much. I appreciate both of you, and I'm very fortunate to be a part of this. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for everybody that's listening, and stay tuned for more, vodcasts out there. So thank you.